Welcome to this webinar on the customer journey. My name is Hannah Price and I'm going to be taking you through the next half an hour or so where we talk on the subject. But before we get started, just a few housekeeping rules for those of you who are first-time webinar attendees. We're using GoToWebinar as our platform today, so you'll notice a panel on the right-hand side. We recommend keep this panel collapsed for the majority of the webinar just so you've got the best view of the screen. But if you've got any questions or any queries or anything that you want to raise with us, please expand that panel again. Write us a question, and I'm here with my colleague Sam today. He'll be able to answer those straight away for you. And if we can't answer them straight away, we'll always get back to you via email, so don't hesitate to get in touch. What's even better is this webinar is going to be recorded and put on YouTube as well, so if you do want to check it out again later, do please feel free. So let's get started. Just to make sure that we're all in the right place before we fully delve in, I wanted to describe to you what we're going to talk about today to make sure you have come to the right webinar and you are going to hear about what you want to expect to hear about. So if you are a service provider and you're willing to take a different perspective on your services that you provide, so if you're willing to look from the outside in and really think about the people and how your customer perceives your services, which can be sometimes some hard truths in there. If that's what you're looking for, then you have come to the right place, because that is what customer journey is all about. It's about looking from the outside in to see the true picture of your service provision. And if that is on your interest today, this is how we're going to break it down into different stages. We're going to start by talking about service design and the discipline of service design, because this really sets the scene for a customer journey and explains how it works and why it's important. We're then going to look at what actually is a customer journey. We're going to do an example one together. We're then going to say, right, okay, how do you make one yourself? How can you take it back to your own organization and make one? And how can you use it, most importantly of all, to make improvements to your service provision at the end of the day? So let's get started with service design. Now, service design is a discipline that deals with shaping and tailoring your service to fit the mold of your intended customer perfectly. So it fits like a glove, so to speak. And it's completely focused on the service, not so much the product. And a good way to illustrate this is to think of two coffee shops. We've got coffee shop A and coffee shop B, and they're side by side, and they actually sell exactly the same coffee for exactly the same price. But for some reason, you always go to coffee shop B. Why is that? Well, it might be the friendly baristas that always make you happy when you walk in. It might be the really cool latte art that they put on the top of your coffee. It might be the comfy sofas, the quick ways to pay. Whatever it is that they've done, they're not selling you different coffee. They've just tailored their service so it really suits what you want when you walk into a coffee shop. And that's what service design is all about. Service design is also a theme within ITIL as well. So anyone who's interested or done research into ITIL will probably recognize the name. ITIL tends to look at service design from an inside-out perspective, so looking at the process first and then how it maps to the people. It's the same concept. We're just actually focusing more on the outside in today and starting with the people on the other end of the scale. Some people might be listening though and thinking, oh yes, that's all very well and good, but I'm not a coffee shop. I'm an internal service provider. I do internal IT support or facilities or HR. I've got no paying customer. I've got no competition. I don't need to worry about customer loyalty. Why is this important to me? And yet, even if you are an internal service provider, delivering great service internally is absolutely fundamental and sometimes even more important than the external services that your business provides. And successful organizations, they know this to be a truth. Let's take the example of Pret. Anyone who has been to London in the past few years has probably noticed Pret popping up on every street corner. There's at least two on every road in London now, and their success has really gone through the roof. And how have they managed to do this? Well, Pret knew that they wanted to make a desired customer experience so that when you walk in the door, you feel in a really friendly place. You feel like you get on with the people behind the till really well, and they'd go the extra mile for you. So how have they made this desired customer experience? Through training staff behaviour and really making sure that their staff felt and lived and believed this ethos that they want to give to their customers. And the only way they can influence staff's behaviour is if they create a working climate that supports that. And that, of course, means fantastic internal services that support their staff, their employees feel valued. And so when they are going the extra mile, it's because they want to. It's because they feel happy and comfortable to, and it's really a part of their everyday ethos. So Pret knew it, and it really has been the secret to their success and the outstanding service that they provide. And they're not a one-off either. It's a very well-known fact across business as well. And if you think about probably the most famous entrepreneur that we know of, Richard Branson, he thought the same thing. He actually coined the phrase that it's not the clients that come first, it's the employees. Because if you take care of your employees, then they'll take care of your clients as well. So really, really crucial for internal and external service providers to pay attention to service design. Service design is a very broad subject. There's loads of different tools and methodologies that we can talk about and go into. Today, we're just going to look at customer journey and how to make a customer journey map. But I've put a few of the other methodologies in the toolkit on the screen there. So if you are interested in service design, please do some research into this in your own time, because it's a very, very interesting subject. But today, as I said, we're going to look at the customer journey. So what is a customer journey? What do we mean when we say customer journey in order to make a customer journey map? Well, to define it simply, a customer journey is a visual representation of the emotions your customer experiences during each interaction or between interactions. Sounds pretty simple, right? There's a few different elements though that I just want to draw your attention to. The first one being the customer. We've already touched on this briefly. This customer could be your internal customers, such as your co-workers. It could be external companies, consumers. It might be citizens if you're, say, part of the government or a hospital providing support and services for the public as well. It's whoever you provide a service to. And for those customers, we're looking at their interactions. And this is a very broad scope of interactions, essentially any way that you communicate with them, whether it might be telephone, email, or conversation, but also the interactions that you're not necessarily there with them for. So for example, if they access any of your content online, if they go onto your web pages, social media, that also counts as an interaction. And we're looking at what happens during those interactions, of course, but also in between. So if you've got moments of gaps between the interactions, they also count in the customer journey, and we'll take those into consideration. And it's the experiences that we're interested first and foremost, but it's also the emotions that come as a result of those experiences. So yes, ABC happened, but how did that make me feel? What was my emotion off the back of that experience that I had? And that's really where the key lies. So that's what a customer journey is in a sentence, but there's no better way to illustrate it really than going through an example together. So I thought, why don't we make our own customer journey together? And I'd like us to take the example of something that actually happened quite recently to us in our London office. We bought a new water cooler. Very, very thrilling and exciting, I'm sure you agree. But it wasn't quite the customer journey that you might expect. So let's walk through it together and see what happens. Now, the majority of customer journeys will look like this. They have a graphical representation where you have an axis, and on one side you have a score, which is the emotion score that you'll give, and we'll figure out and talk about how you can exactly set that up later. And on the bottom, you've got a timeline of events. So we'll start from the top. The London office bought a brand new water cooler, and at that point in time, we were absolutely thrilled. We've been waiting on this for ages, couldn't wait to get a glass of icy cool water to refresh us on the day-to-day. However, that emotion didn't last very long because unfortunately it broke down a couple of weeks later, which wasn't what we were expecting. Turned out it wasn't as durable as we were hoping it would be. So at that moment, as you can see, our score there goes down a little bit because we're a little bit disgruntled, like, oh, didn't think this would happen. But not to worry, we know what to do. We're going to try and contact the supplier and get this fixed, at which point we made a call for help. However, this didn't really go as we planned either. It just wasn't a pleasant experience, really. We tried to get in touch with the supplier, and it was really difficult to find out how we could contact them. Eventually, we found a general number on their website, but because it was general, it took a really long time to get through to them. We were on hold for ages as well, which didn't help. So, our experience just got worse and worse at this point. We were feeling quite frustrated. Eventually, the supplier did agree, yes, we need to send an engineer out. However, that then started a point of something that we call the big unknown, because we didn't know when the engineer was going to arrive, how long it would take, what day he would turn up for. We couldn't prepare for it, and we were pretty annoyed at this point. We kind of got the impression that this company just wanted our money, They just wanted us to buy the water cooler off them, and they didn't care. And that might not have been true, but that really was the emotion that we were feeling at that moment in time. Eventually, the engineer did come and he did fix it, and it was a simple fix in the end. It wasn't anything drastic, and the water cooler does still work now, but our experience with that company is not a good one. So even though it's resolved, our feeling is still pretty disgruntled at the end of that, and we're not massively happy. And to be honest, we wouldn't buy a water cooler from them again. So that's an example of a simple customer journey. In reality, you might find your customer journeys go a little bit more like this. You've got more touch points, more things going on, but it's still the principle is the same. You've got here a visual representation of the emotions your customer experiences during each interaction or between interactions. And that's it in a nutshell. So how can you make your own? How can you take this away and start creating a customer journey at your own organization? Well, there are three main components to a customer journey, and they are personas, touch points, and emotions and scores. So let's start with personas first of all. Now, don't forget, you make your customer journey to experience what your customers are going through, right? So it's therefore really important that you know who your customers are and what's important to them as a person. And that's why you make a persona. A persona is a fictional person that you fill out like a card or a piece of paper for with the typical behaviors of your target group. And you can be quite broad and creative with this, talk about what they like, what they don't like, get to know them, really, give them a name, make them almost like a real person. And this is important not only to help you make your customer journey, but it's also useful for making future decisions around service design as well, because you can really look through their eyes to help make that decision and say, oh, okay, if I was Brian, how would Brian feel about this? What would he want to do? It's actually a technique used in a lot of courts of law as well. They will often create fictional characters and fictional people for the lawyers and for people to look through the eyes of to help them understand the situation better. And it's exactly the same case here with a persona. So don't be afraid as well to make multiple personas as well. If you have got a diverse customer base, which I'm sure most people listening do, you'll want to make a persona for each of your different target groups. So don't feel you have to stick to just one. Next, you move on to making your touch points. And this is the fun part, really, because you actually get to talk to your customers. So we say you should invite them to an interview and go in depth with them, really get to know how their particular experience of your service was. And you can either be quite broad with your who you decide to interview because you want to have a very broad service experience, or you can say, actually, I'm really more interested in the particular experience of a new starter or an onboarding process. So you might decide to interview people who have recently joined the company. It's up to you. When you're talking to them, be sure to ask them about their goals. What were they trying to achieve when they were experiencing your service? What interactions did they come across? What communication channels did they use? What happened in between communication channels? Get as much detail as you can from them about their perspective, and then write it down. So you might get something that looks a little bit like this. So this is our touch point for the moment in the story where we called for help with our water cooler supplier. And you can see we basically just wrote down what the interviewee said, including the bit at the end where they're like, well, I was on hold for half an hour. I'm kind of starting to doubt here whether they'll ever get back to me. Also record the communication channels, which we've done so at the bottom, which was telephone to try and call them, and also website to try and find the contact details. The final thing you want to do at this point is look at adding emotions and scores to this customer perspective that you have. Because after all, a customer journey is about perception accompanied by emotion. So you don't want to leave the emotion part out, because that's really the most important part. A useful model to help get you started and help engage the interviewer about actually how they really felt at that point is what you can see on the screen here, which is called Plutchik's Wheel of Emotions. And you'll notice that the closer that you get to the center of the wheel, the more intense and stronger the emotions are. So this can really be a good talking point to kind of make them feel, actually, no, I was either just a little bit annoyed or maybe just full on rage at the point when you were waiting for this water cooler to arrive. Once you've discussed these emotions and given them a score based on how positive or how negative they are, you put them onto your touch points, so you get something a little like this. So for this particular touch point, we gave a score of 4 out of 10, and we said the emotion was actually pretty frustrated at this point. Once you have all of your touch points, you put them together into your graph, and you get something that looks like this, and there's your graphical representation. So you can see all of the ups, the downs, the positive and the negative experiences that your customer has had through this particular service. So that's how you make one, but why is this important, and how can you use this data that you've got to try and improve? Well, we've already talked about it at the start a little bit. The importance of this really shouldn't be thought lightly of, because you've got a piece of information in front of you here that tells you the exact feeling of your customer towards your service, which you might not have known. There might be some surprises in there. And once you've got that information in front of you, it will allow you to isolate specific pain points, which if you highlight those and focus your improvements on those pain points, it will make your customers happy very, very quickly. And as we know, happy customers are easier to help. And as Richard Branson knows, happy customers make happy service providers. So what you have created there, don't just ignore it and say, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know people didn't really enjoy that part of our service. Use it and isolate those pain points to target improvements. But there will, of course, be areas that you can improve. No one's expecting to get the perfect customer journey straight away. And when you notice those more negative emotions creeping up, start to ask yourself, well, why are those negative emotions there? What has caused those? We typically see negative emotions caused by things such as things happening unexpectedly that aren't in our control. If as a customer you feel like you've lost your independence, or there's a lack of information, that can also make you feel quite disgruntled. And of course, also waiting times can make customers feel quite unhappy as well. So these are typical things that will cause negative emotions. What can we do to shift these up? Well, there are 3 key areas that we've identified that can shift a negative emotion to a positive one. And they are control, communication, and the creation of a self-sustaining ecosystem. I'd like to go through each one in turn and see how it can really, really improve the experience of your customer, starting off with control. So coming back to the story that we told right at the start with the water cooler, we're at the point now where we went for the call for help. And as you'll recall, it wasn't a great experience. And one of the main reasons for this is because we didn't feel in control. We didn't know where to go. We weren't sure how to contact them. And actually trying to find that information was not easy. And when you feel a lack of control like that, and you don't know what to do and you don't know where to go, things are out of your hands, it can make you feel quite helpless as a customer and really undervalued. So how can we shift that? How can we move that up? Well, control is all about showing what you have got to offer, providing your customers with a clear understanding of here's what you can expect from us and here's how you can get it from us in a really easy to understand way. So easily structured, easy to navigate, just information at their fingertips. It makes the customer feel a lot less dependent on you. It makes them feel that, oh, I can go and find that out for myself and I just know where I stand. I know I can expect this level of support and how to get it. You may be thinking to yourself, hang on, that sounds a little bit familiar. That sounds a lot like a service catalogue. And that's because it is a service catalogue. Imagine the case of the water cooler company. If they were able to have a service catalogue online of the different services, levels of support, contact details, and next steps of what to do if we did have a breakage, our call for help experience would have been much more pleasant. And yes, sure, we've still got a broken down water cooler, but we know what to do and we can take control of the situation. The next section which we want to talk about that can also help shift your emotions much more into the positive scale is around the area of communication. And this is really crucial if you have any periods of the big unknown. And essentially, we're not saying here that you'll ever be able to get rid of those waiting periods where they are waiting on a service, and that's not the case. There'll always be those waiting periods, but there are some crucial things that we can do to make those big unknowns feel a little bit better. And they come down to talking to the customer and always telling them, 1, what you're doing, 2, why you're doing it, and 3, when they can expect it to be done by, in language that they'll understand, so they really know what's going on. Research shows that actually people don't mind waiting as long as you tell them how long they're going to be waiting for. And it's so true. Think about the last time you ordered a package and the text message or the email came through, says, oh, we're going to deliver your package today between the hours of 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. And you're like, well, great. That's not very useful because that's all day. I don't actually know really when you're going to arrive. Contrast that to getting a message that says, oh, we're going to deliver your package today between the hours of 11 and 12. That's a much better, clearer communication, and you know how to plan your day. You know exactly what to expect. And they haven't actually changed the time that they're going to deliver the package. They were always going to deliver it at that time. It's just they've changed the way they communicated with you, which makes a really big difference. Coming back to our graph again, if we can do the same thing with the water cooler situation and we knew when the engineer was going to arrive, it's going to make that great unknown a little bit better. Sure, we're still waiting, so maybe we're not as happy as we could be, but it's much, much better than the pure rage that we're feeling when we have no idea when they're going to turn up at all. So not only have we managed to bring up these pain points of the call for help and the waiting period, but you'll notice as well that the resolution moment can also be much happier too, because we've brought the trend of our negative emotions throughout the story up. Therefore, the moment of resolution is also going to trend up as well, because overall we've had a better experience. What this means is that if you're able to isolate these pain points and improve them, it will have a direct impact on your customer satisfaction. So when their issue is resolved and they're giving you feedback, they're going to be much, much happier about the whole experience. Even though the outcome is still the same, we still solve the water cooler issue in this example at the same time as we would have done without these changes. It's just that we've got much higher customer satisfaction at the end of it. So the final area that I want us to focus on today is something called the self-sustaining ecosystem. And this really is the gold standard that you're trying to achieve within creating the perfect customer journey. And the self-sustaining ecosystem is all about making your customer as self-sufficient as possible, so they are completely independent and reliant on themselves. And how do we do that? Through knowledge. If you're able to publish a central location for knowledge, which includes frequently asked questions, manuals, guides, how-to, and you put that somewhere where they can easily access and browse through, you're giving the power back to the customer, so they're completely in control and they have all the information they need available to them. Not only is this good because it helps them solve something themselves, but that can also be the case that it can reduce waiting times. So back to the graph again. Let's imagine the scenario where I went online to the water cooler supplier's website and I found a manual online. And I did a quick search for the FAQs, and it says, oh, sometimes because of the movement at the transition period of the water cooler, it can tend to reset. Very easy to fix. Just go to the control panel on the back and do X, Y, Z, and it should work again. I tried that out and I managed to fix it straight away. Now my waiting time is massively reduced. I feel great because I've managed to solve the problem straight away. And now look at my customer journey. Everything is in the positive and we're much more happy about the whole situation. So the self-sustaining ecosystem really, really is the key to kind of having that perfect experience through a knowledge base online. Now, we're not necessarily saying that every single step is always going to be, pure ecstasy. You'll notice that the breakdown moment is still some slight disgruntlement there, and that can't be avoided. But if we can make all those other points as positive as possible through excellent control, giving good communication, and even helping the customer to solve something themselves, your customer journey will be a huge success. So that's the whole shebang, really. That's all that we can tell you about a customer journey, and we've covered quite a lot of different areas. So I just wanted to give a quick recap. We talked first of all about service design and why it's important, and that was really the framework really for us to go on and show a customer journey. We looked at an example of a customer journey with the water cooler, and then we also went through how you can make your own. Don't forget the 3 key points of making your own customer journey. So we've got personas, touch points, and emotions and scores. And then we also looked how you can target your improvements as well, looking specifically at how you can give your customers more control, specifically through use of a service catalog, how you can improve your methods of communication, and also how you can create a self-sustaining ecosystem for a self-sufficient customer purely by putting knowledge online for their disposal. So you're probably itching to get started, and I don't blame you, because it is really exciting having this insight. It almost feels like a rare thing to be able to see through the eyes of the customer. So I would encourage everyone listening to give it a go. And don't feel like this has to be a huge project that takes up a lot of your time. You can really, kind of downsize this to be as small and manageable as you want it to be. If you don't want to spend a lot of time making lots of different personas, for example, you don't have to. Why don't you just interview some of your customers and talk to them, find out how they experience your services, and you might be surprised about some of the things that you hear from them. And keep an eye on your inboxes in the coming days as well, because Topdesk will be sending out a template for your own customer journey that you can fill in and take away. And it's just a good resource really to get you thinking and get you started to make your own first customer journey. What's more is that we're always here to help you at Topdesk as well. So myself and my other team of consultants, we've got experience in setting up customer journeys, or if you already know pain points that you want to isolate, such as improvements in your service catalog, or maybe best practices around knowledge management, we're here to help you and to make your customer journey as positive as possible. And that's all we've got for today. So I'd like to say thank you very much to everybody for listening to our webinar. Please don't hesitate to get in touch if you do have any questions about customer journey or anything we talked about today. And we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar in May, which will be on the subject of the new asset management module. Thank you very much.